Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Brad Busick, SVP and CIO at MultiCare Health System. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor in chief. Brad, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, great, Brad. So, looking forward to chatting with you, having a fun time here. You want to start off by telling me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, you bet. Well, first, good to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity. MultiCare is located in the Pacific Northwest. We're a mid-sized hospital system, 13 hospitals, about 26,000 employees, and span a couple different geographies. Aside from just hosting our own instance of Epic, we also support 48 other
Oh,
providers and practices in our communities and are excited to do so. I wouldn't say we're bleeding edge, Anthony, but we 100% push the capabilities of technology in order to provide access to care for our community.
you think you're the what we call the fast follower?
Yeah, and it says in some cases we're first. In some cases
Mhm.
we'll break the glass, but I would say a fast follower for sure.
All right, very good. So we're going to chat today about the concept of entropy, which I know is has been on your mind, crossed your mind. Real leadership discussion today, and I was thinking of the analogy before we got on the phone that it's almost like the conductor of an orchestra. You have to you're looking out on your team, and you're looking for subtle problems, underperformance, issues, bottlenecks, things like that. And part of your job is to just make sure the engine is humming, right? But you tell me, you about this concept of entropy and what went into your head when you started thinking about this in terms of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that it was really interesting, and honestly, a diverse place that this came from. I was with my son in Las Vegas. He had just started his spring break, and what was really cool about that is that a lot of times as a dad, you never really get the chance to get one-on-one time. And so I said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" He's like, "What do you think about going to Vegas?" And I had two reactions. I was like, first, why is my 16-year-old asking me to go to Vegas? So I was both, maybe dismayed as well as impressed. Um, but we decided to go to Vegas, and we hung out by the pool, and we saw some shows and grabbed some dinner. One of the shows we saw was Penn and Teller, which is a famous musician, famous magician in Vegas. They've been around forever.
Yeah.
Um, Part of their trick, Anthony, one of their tricks was around this idea of entropy, and the premise of it simply was uh, entropy plays a massive role in everything that we think about, except we don't really ever call it that. Um,
Hmm.
and my brain immediately started to go as he set the trick up. And so I always keep an active OneNote going of topics that I wanted to
Oh
think
yeah.
about more or learn about. And so I wrote it down. I immediately glanced over at my son, who just shook his head because he knew exactly what I was doing. And what eventually merged on the flight home was just a quick blog about in the world of chemistry and physics, how do you actually think about your culture's thermodynamics report in the spirit of managing entropy? And entropy in this world, I think, particularly in technology, is actually this idea that most things without course correction will glide towards disorder or randomness or uncertainty. And that is 100% true in the world of healthcare IT. And so I thought it would be an interesting topic to write about. And the question is actually culturally, like, what are you doing to manage it? Um, and sometimes, to your point, that shows up in poor performance with your staff, super siloed thinking, or just a crappy culture. And that is something that I have an allergic reaction to. And so I wanted to get a piece out just to at least start the dialogue. The really fascinating part about it was the amount of direct messages I got from other leaders around the country
Mm.
just saying, "Holy cow, it's like you're reading our mail in terms of what's happening with my system." And I love that because some people can't post that stuff publicly. I mean, no one wants to admit that their culture is a disaster. And yet, I think if you and I were to go take a true pulse and hold up the truth mirror, I think we'd see that a lot of cultures are struggling. And so, not that multicare has it figured out, because we don't, but what are we doing to manage that entropy? And so, being able to share that feels like an opportunity.
I think this is just so brilliant. I really like. I think this is incredibly insightful, and I think about this stuff a lot. And as you were talking, I had a few thoughts. Um, I think this can, you know, what you were talking about made me think of technical debt,
Yeah.
right? And almost like cultural technical debt.
Yeah.
And what happens is, at least this is an observation in my own life, you have certain things that you should do, you should tackle. Problems have come up, issues are hanging around, but you don't want to tackle them because they're annoying or
That's
they're going
right.
to be a heavy lift. So you don't tackle it. And then another one comes up, and maybe you don't tackle that. They start to accumulate. Now you have 3, 4 big problems.
Totally.
And I think as a leader, the worst leaders I've ever worked for were the ones that didn't solve problems. They just let them fester. Um, and that
Yeah.
always seemed to me a very frustrating issue. And I wonder if that's how a culture starts to decline.
Yeah. You
And
nailed it.
that's the right, that's the propagation or
Yep.
that's the slide to disorder.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, no, you nailed it. I actually think it's, maybe classified as not technical debt, but institutional decay.
Yeah.
So if I were to actually go and plot uh, the the relative impact to certain elements in an ecosystem, right? Like some of that could be change management. Some could be just communication. Some of it could be how we treat our people.
Mhm.
Some of it could just be cynicism that grows over time. I- Any one of those by themselves, you may be like, oh yeah, well that's just Anthony or that's just Brad. But when compounded, that you got to pay that card off at some point. And so I think this notion of entropy as a discipline says, how do we not let enough decay build up on any one of those pillars, Anthony, so that when you go to pay it off, it's actually an easy transaction. And so if you don't pay it off, I think it shows up in wildly high turnover, loss of shared meaning, just wild amount of information overload and noise, but no focus on what's truly important. And then it's an overall poor culture. And I would say any leader, I don't care if you have the title or not, I don't think we spend enough time measuring that or thinking about that. And actually, what's worse is we admire that problem and just wait for it to break. And I just know that my team specifically in 2025, we are not admiring that problem. We are 100% getting after that.
Yeah, a couple of the issues that I think really cause this decay, and I talk to people, all kinds of people in my personal life too. I'm always curious about, people I know who are having trouble at work and whatnot. And a lot of the times it's interpersonal conflicts that are not resolved by a higher leader.
Yep.
Almost, and I remember this specifically about the Enron thing. I just re-listened to that book, Smartest Guys
Oh,
in the Room,
totally.
and Ken Lay was the worst with this. He was the
Yep.
CEO, but he just wanted to be happy and smile and go to events and galas and skate through life. And people would bring him problems, and he was known for not resolving anything because he
Yep.
didn't want to make anybody mad. He never wanted
Yep.
to say no to your face. So it was, you
Yep.
guys will work it out. You guys will figure it out. And it
Yep.
became a survival of the fittest scenario. So I think that's one of the issues that seemed to me to cause a lot of problems. It's a leader who refuses to step in and deal with an issue or a problem employee. It's also, and if you want to touch on a couple of these things, also one of the bigger things I see is blurred lines of responsibility where multiple people, it's kind of very blurry. So you
Yeah.
have people working on the same thing, and that starts to create rivalries. And some leaders who are really bad love that. They love that
Yeah, they
rival.
do.
They think that's a positive. I think it's terrible. But
Agree.
anyway, your thoughts on some of this stuff?
Yeah, we're really aligned. I actually would take the debt conversation further into what I had a conversation with early in my career with one of my mentors named Dr. Eleanor Bell, and we were at the Gates Foundation, and we sat in her office at Gates, and we drew on the wall, Anthony, this idea of emotional debt. And so in this dialogue, I grabbed the pen and I just said, all right, look, if we thought about our own ecosystem, I want you to name the top 7 people that you engage with the most. And let's actually quantify on a XY axis the importance of that person's role in order for you to be effective relative to the amount of emotional debt you've accumulated. And that emotional debt, by the way, or you can swap it out for relational debt, is broken promises, not
Mhm.
executing and doing what you said you're going to do, being a crappy partner, not having a good product, not being a collaborator. And it was a fascinating, and when she was done, I did mine. And to be able to objectively sit back and look at that and go, man, I've got a lot of debt with Anthony. And no wonder my world's a disaster. That's one benefit. The second is in aggregate, if at some point you've got emotional or relational debt with a ton of people, maybe the problem isn't the other people, maybe it's you. And holding up that truth mirror to me is, I think if you aren't surrounding yourself with people that are truth tellers in your life, you got a different you got a different problem. And so I literally just had the gift of having this exact conversation now that I had at the Gates Foundation with someone else that we're in a what we call a hypo relationship or a high potential mentorship engagement. And we hopped on a window here in Tacoma and we just drew that XY axis. And I just had this person name, like, who are all the people that you feel like we've got strain with right now? One, they were honest about it. And so, and I know this, right? So I was able to kind of be a counterbalance to say, like, do you really think it's that good with Anthony?
Mhm.
Or, okay, you're right. And so we started to adjust. Okay, that was interesting. What made it actionable was what you do once you have the data. This person took the onus to say, hey, I've been meeting with my coach, and my coach is suggesting that I reach out to you because I think there's some relational debt we've accumulated. What could I do to be a better partner to you, Anthony?
Mhm.
Game changer. It
Mm.
actually started a tidal wave where this person who was making the call, all the recipients that received her call started doing that with people in their own teams. And we had this little tsunami happen that wasn't anticipated. But again, back to the entropy piece, I could have let that fester. She could have been an adequate producer at best, or she could have been lights out and removed all of those barriers and not admire the entropy. And she did it, and it worked. And now she's made that part of her own tool belt.
Very good, very good. Another one that comes to mind, another sort of creator of entropy or poor leadership is, and I've heard this over and over again, um, sort of issuing directives or, go do this or that, that the individual will spend a lot of time on and effort, and then nonchalantly saying, "Yeah, I don't need that anymore," when they come back with
Yeah.
it. So it's this blasé, and I remember this happening to me, and I was so mad when somebody did this to me when I was working for someone. It was infuriating because I had put so much effort into what,
Yeah.
and then it was casual. "Yeah, you know what? We've decided to change focus on that." But it
Yeah.
seems nonchalant and casual, and to me, that's a problem.
Yeah, it speaks to a couple things, right? It's if everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. Go and do this, and then because of the acceleration of change, we've pivoted and said leader didn't have the guts or integrity to go back and be like, "Hey, Anthony, I don't know that I need that anymore." So it's
Right.
not honest honoring their time. But what's worse is what's caused by that institutional decay is now a break in trust
Totally.
because I don't trust that you when you come to me the next time that actually that's urgent. And I
No.
actually may test that and say like, I'm going to make you ask me twice.
Right.
And I know people that do it.
Oh,
I know
wow.
people that do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
In other organizations that their leader is that. One guy has what he calls the rule of 3. This leader will ask me 3 times, and if I get a third ask, I know that it's important and I'll go do it and I'll crush it. But I won't even jump until I get the second or third ask. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And you think
So
about the inefficiency that causes,
oh,
right?
it's expensive, and yet I actually think, I mean, these are the ones that we know about, right? Like, this is the CIO confessional booth here.
Right.
I would say this is super common among CIOs.
So, the ways to see if this is happening in your organization, if you were giving advice to your colleagues, see, the problem here is I've always said a culture comes from the leader.
Yeah,
And maybe the leader in IT is the CIO, but they're not the leader of the organization. That would really
that's
be
right.
the CEO.
That's right.
And you can be the greatest CIO in the world and have, like, you can be dead on with your leadership skills. But if you're working for a CEO that has some of these traits we talked about, you can't change the ship. It comes from the top. I always said that.
Yeah,
Does that make sense to you? And that's
it
a
does.
challenging position to be in.
Yeah, it is. And I actually think in those situations, the CIOs that I know that have really poor leadership, they actually become an umbrella for their staff
Mm,
as opposed to a filter. And the umbrella is meant to protect. The filter just lets it through. And I will say, even outside of healthcare, um, yes, you know, and I know because at this point of life, I don't need a degenic AI to tell me if someone is an authentic leader or not. I just don't. You can detect that almost immediately. And there's a separation when you hear the values come out of their mouths, but you also, because of the position you're in, see them not leading that or living that. And when that happens, I had one individual that I know outside of healthcare actually confront the leader on it and played a clip from a video
mhm,
of an all hands and said, "You said this was important, except when we were, at our retreat, I actually saw you do this." And that leader was so grateful for one, someone to have the guts to come up and do that. Because as you know, the higher you go on the food chain, the less people are willing to talk to you. And I
totally.
actually think that's one of the secret elements to prevent entropy is how do you surround yourself with people that are objective and are going to speak truth into your life? Because I am not objective enough to see my own blind spots. That's why I hire the staff that I hire. And we have a no ego and no jerk policy. And so we're together at a minimum quarterly for our retreats, but we're doing staff calibration right now. This isn't Brad Busick calibrating my entire 500 person staff. This is us calibrating each other's staff to say, hey, I know, Anthony, you said that this person's a 3. I actually see him showing up as a 2, and here's why.
Mhm,
And there's a thoughtful dialogue. Well, that's the umbrella. I can control what I can control as the CIO. And when I get to be CEO, then I'll be able to control all of it.
mhm. Yeah, you talk about how do you surround yourself with the people that will speak truth to you? Um, well, to me, and I'll give my
Yeah,
thought on that. It's
please.
it's you building trust, right? I mean,
Yeah, of course.
it's almost like the first time they do it, it'll be like a squirrel poking their head out, being really
Yep,
nervous, and they'll give you a little something, and they'll see how you react. And
yep,
if you stop inviting them to meetings or do things like that, then they go, "Okay, he's not
yeah,
living what he said he's living." But if
yeah,
you say, "Hey, appreciate that," and everything goes fine, then maybe the next time they come out a little more and a little more,
yeah,
because it's gotta be cultivated, especially if they have worked for someone who has been the opposite. They're gonna be very gun shy about
that's
speaking
right.
truth to power, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It totally does, and I will say, trust is earned, right? And it only takes once to break
Yeah,
that. I'm super fortunate because my boss here at MultiCare is the former CIO. She just happens to now be the president. So I don't have to explain what I do. The
yeah,
large majority of leaders in healthcare have no idea what's happening in IT.
right.
They know how to run operations, but
Mhm,
IT is a tax.
yeah,
And you know me and have read enough about my philosophy on that. IT is not a tax. It's an enabler. And in
yeah,
some cases it's a full-blown competitive advantage.
mhm,
And so because of that, she and I have a ton of conversations because trust has been earned. And she has full right, not because she's my superior, but she knows Brad Busick as a human. And she's like, look, I don't know that I feel like you're living your values here. You want to talk about powerful?
mm,
I know she has my best interest.
mhm,
And so she would say that to me because I know her heart. That's a super rare thing to have in a reporting relationship. When you have it, there's just something different about it. And when you don't, you have entropy.
yeah. Well, you gotta live it first, right? Do
That's
it,
right.
and, maybe you'll be emulated by your boss if they see how you're
Yeah,
behaving to your staff. That can work.
absolutely.
Here's an observation and a thought. Why is it that, and I hear about this all the time when I'm told about other people's bosses. Why is it that so many terrible leaders get into leadership positions?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've also noticed that trait, and you kind of have to wonder um, what makes a good leader, right? I mean, if you like just thematically step back and analyze that, and then you kind of juxtapose that to the leaders that we know today. Um, is Elon Musk a good leader? is my former boss, Bill Gates, a good leader? Or you actually zoom it and even go the athletic routes, like people that we're putting on pedestals.
Mhm.
Mike Tyson, who abused his wife and is a drug addict, and like, is he a good leader?
What about Pete Rose? People say he was not the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Or celebrities that we know that we kind of, and so, my thinking on this is I actually am not enamored with title. I actually don't, I have no um, prestige associated with org size, how much money you make. At the end of the day, are you a good human? And I spent a ton of time with my own kids talking about the fabrication of society and the things that we do to please people, or the things that we do that society values, and how empty those are.
Mhm.
I think what makes a good leader, because of our intellect now, is, are you authentic? Are you a good communicator? And do people know your heart, and would they want to follow you? Because you can't be
Right.
a leader unless you have followers.
Right. So if, if you listen, one of the easiest ways to be liked is to say yes to everything. Like,
Yep.
you can't do that. That doesn't work. But sure, if you never said no to anybody and everybody could take off whenever they want and do whatever they want and nobody was held to account and people could come in whatever time they want, right? So obviously you can't do that. And there are times you have to say no. In
Yep.
general, you want to say yes as much as possible.
Sure.
Um, but there again, talk about I guess sometimes you got to be the bad guy. Sometimes you have to say that thing you want to do, you can't do, and here's why, because it doesn't
That's
work
right.
with our over. So, and
Yeah. Well, you hit a key word here, and I want to maybe draw the line of delineation here. Um, yeah. If you want to be liked, say yes. If you want to be respected, say no.
hmm
And I would say, in my role, it's not a popularity contest. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do what's right for our patients and for MultiCare. And sometimes that is not popular, and I get that. I'll give a real life example. 2 years ago, we did a reduction in force across MultiCare. Not popular. These are people that are in our community. They've served, and with the financial headwinds we're all facing, we have to continue to lower the cost of IT. And so I made that decision, and we did that. I own that, and it changed the trajectory of people's careers and lives. And it's one thing to stand up on, LinkedIn and polish and talk about the, cost savings we've achieved.
hmm
I mean, it was an absolute gut punch. These are people's lives,
hmm
and I had to wrestle with that. And
hmm
and so that is a balance. I'm not saying that I'm a good leader because I did it, but I went into that knowing that it wasn't going to be popular, and I know I needed to do what was right for the organization, and so I did.
Well, at the very least, you didn't make somebody else do it. Right.
I I,
That's the
I did it
that's
myself.
right. That's the
Yeah,
big cop out is you get one you
yeah, I
got
did it myself. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, and that was a really painful Groundhog's Day, right? Of just having to repeat those conversations over and
oh,
over because, but I would never send one of my leaders in by
oh.
themselves to do that. So I was there for all of them.
Yeah, and that goes back to the Ken Lay thing I said. He
Yeah,
didn't he wanted to say yes to everyone. He couldn't handle not being liked.
that's right.
And so that doesn't work either. So,
Yeah,
and if you don't call people to account, you don't then you go back to what I said about not solving problems, then other people see there's a problem, there's a person who's a problem that's bringing down our productivity, bringing down our culture, and Brad won't do anything
that's
about it.
right.
You
That's
can't
right.
have that either. So,
No, nope.
go ahead.
No, they're because people are getting smart enough to know that what gets measured gets managed. And so if I tolerate that for one area, it means I must tolerate that with my own team. And so we are really thoughtful about calibration in the IT department. Um, are the folks that are coming onto our team uh, performers? Do they live their values? Can they execute? And it's that fine line between what someone does relative to how they do it. And I think
Mhm.
it's a really fine line to strike. And when you get it right, because your culture is crushing and your customers are thrilled. I think when you get it wrong, you look a lot like some of these other institutions that have wild turnover and really, really low NPS scores.
Mhm. You have a lot of people working for you. From what we're talking about and my thoughts on it are that obviously the people you have are the most important,
They are.
right? So you follow that to its logical conclusion. It's hiring is so important.
It's critical.
But when you have so many people, I don't know how much you can have oversight or be involved. You balance that with the fact that it's so important. So what are your thoughts on when you have a big team taking and not being nonchalant or not passing that off to HR because it's so hard to get rid of a problem once it's on your team?
Yeah, and not only is it hard to get rid of it, the deficit that it's created, the
Yeah,
debt that it's
yeah,
manifested, you got to now go spend months cleaning that up.
right.
Meanwhile, leadership is, being looked at by the staff like, well, we all knew this was a problem. What are you guys doing about that? Yeah, I mean, I am 100% not in every interview at this point,
Mhm.
given the size of our org.
Right.
However, the leaders that I've hired
Mhm.
trust them implicitly. And I would say from a leadership lens, certainly director and up, I'm
Mhm.
involved in those conversations. I'm involved in those interviews because it's our team.
Right.
And I want to make sure we have the right make and model.
Mhm. Very good. All right. What do you think is the relationship between entropy and burnout?
Wildly high,
Yeah.
meaning the more disorder and chaos there is,
Mhm.
the higher burnout, the higher institutional decay, and the higher burnout rate. And that's measured in a couple ways, not
Mhm.
necessarily just numerically with turnover, but
Right.
what's the quality of someone's product? Are they literally
Right.
just checking the box? Is cynicism growing across your organization where you've almost had this irony culture? That's all symptoms of burnout. And so when you start to see things like, sarcasm and irony
Oh.
displace authenticity, there's your signal. And so you got to go look at like, well, what's that person working on? Or why is that person on 24 hours a day? And can we do something to help course correct it? I think you have to ask the question both overtly and covertly through anonymous surveys, which we do pulse surveys a lot, because I want to get a measure of some of the things that people are willing to say publicly, and then obviously the things that people want to say privately.
Mhm. Very good. And your thoughts on mentoring? You talked about, that.
Bullish,
Yeah. Tell me how
bullish.
um, you can't take on too many people that you're gonna sort of try and mold, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, mentoring to me almost implies a hierarchy of I'm going to go mentor you, Anthony. And my experience has actually been the other way. It's been um, and I mentioned someone earlier where we have a high potential program here in IT. Um, those hypos are handpicked. And I learned just as much from my hypo last session as this person did from me.
Mhm.
We share life, we share learnings. We both are at very different stages of our career in terms of experience, as well as, I'm from outside of healthcare, right? And so I've only had the last 5 years while this person's had, decades. Mentorship to me is about learning and being willing to do something with what you're taught.
Mhm.
I'm wildly bullish on it, and I actually would rather have a few and go deep than have a bunch and go wide. And so that's why I think a program that allows your org to have a false force multiplier, where I've got my leaders doing that with their staff, I'm doing that with my staff. Suddenly, all boats rise.
Alright, very good. We're just about out of time, Brad, but just as a final question, maybe a piece of advice for your colleagues. Let's talk about culture. Um, let's say you're a CIO at an organization and the culture isn't fantastic. Um, maybe you don't your CEO isn't killing it in terms of culture. You talked about the idea of filtering and blocking the umbrella. Some of that you could protect, but what's your best advice for moving that culture, changing that culture, and improving it?
Yeah, first you got to know that you need to actually go do it. And the cultures that I see that are a hot mess most of the time have no idea that they're a disaster. Again, back in the spirit of kind of thermodynamics, uh, the symptoms we talked about in this entire conversation, Anthony, don't actually mean collapse.
Mhm.
They could also actually signal that you're slowing down your transformation or your evolution just isn't happening as fast as you want. I think if you manage that entropy, it could actually lead to, a new paradigm or a creative recombination that allows you to actually adjust
Mm,
and address the problems that are there. And so I think step one in that journey is admitting that there's a problem. And
mhm,
then step two, which is the title of my newsletter on LinkedIn, is to stop admiring the problem, like to
mm,
get after it and get a
mhm,
team around you that want to get after it. And
mhm,
we have not arrived. We continue on the journey, but which means it doesn't have an end. We're
mhm.
continuing to raise the bar.
That was awesome, Brad. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this, and I hope we can catch up down the road.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Take care.
All right, cheers.